Nobody made a mistake. You deserve to be where you are, and you kind of owe the world your authentic voice and your authentic experience because we need you. We need everyone. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, Punk Rock to Doc with Dr. Phil Turner here. And today we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome. It's something you may not have ever heard of, but I guarantee you at some point you've felt it. As always, guys, if you're liking the content, please make sure to like and subscribe down below. That way you'll be kept up to date on all my latest content. All right, let's get into it. Imposter syndrome was first named by Dr. Pauline Rose Clance, and she was a psychologist who worked with a lot of undergraduate college students. And what Dr. Clance saw is that many of her students and patients felt like they didn't belong in the academic program which they had been accepted to. They feared they were somehow let in by mistake or just in generally didn't belong. That probably sounds familiar to a lot of you because I know I've definitely felt that way before. And she found that these feelings spread across all barriers. No one was immune to this. It spread across all genders, all races, all occupations. I mean, it affected everybody. And although imposter syndrome seems to affect everybody, it may affect people who are high achievers and people who come from underrepresented backgrounds at a greater degree. And you can imagine why, and we're going to talk about that. So if everyone eventually has these feelings where they don't belong or they somehow will be found out as a fake, how come you've never heard of it? That's a great question. The answer to that question is something called pluralistic ignorance. And all that really means is that we have self-doubts and we think that nobody else has self-doubts, so we don't talk about it because we're embarrassed about it, or we think that we're the only ones going through it, when that couldn't be further from the truth. And that's what I'm here to do today, everyone. I'm here to talk about it. You know that I love lists, so I came up with the 5 things that you need to do to overcome imposter syndrome. It's not always easy, but you can definitely do it, so let's get into it. Okay, the first thing you need to do is double down on your skill sets and experience. This is the most important step, in my opinion, to overcoming imposter syndrome. For me, imposter syndrome is something that was with me since the first day I decided to change careers. I always knew that I enjoyed learning, I always knew I was relatively good at school, but there was something that told me that getting a background in the hard science classes like chemistry and physics was something that just wasn't for me. I had always assumed that science was reserved for the top 1% of the smartest people in whatever school you went to, and for people who were just walking around in lab coats in like first grade. But it turns out the only real requirement that you need to be a scientist is you just have to be curious. Literally, that's it. You just have to be curious. My curiosity alone is kind of what allowed me to excel in science classes, because when you're just asking questions why, and you have to figure out the reasons why, it doesn't really feel like work, and it doesn't really feel like the tedious task that I had made it up to be in my own mind. And being curious and putting that curiosity into action is a skill of mine, and I never really thought that that could help me in something like science. And that's the real killer about imposter syndrome. It tells you that your skills and your experience are not good enough, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Your individual skills and your individual experience is actually what's going to help catapult you into the next level of your career or education. So you really want to double down on that. All right, everybody, the second thing you need to do to overcome imposter syndrome is to stop comparing yourself to others. I know it's application season for a lot of you people, especially my PTs out there. PT Cast, I think, opened yesterday. So this is where you really need to put this step into action. Stop comparing yourself to others. So let's fast forward to when I was applying to graduate school. And unfortunately, let's crank up the impostometer to about 11. It only goes up to 10 normally. This is where we really start to unfairly compare ourselves to others. And this comparison really became an unhealthy and toxic habit that I fell into, especially when I was getting ready to go to graduate school or apply to graduate school. I would get on different forums like Student Doctor Network, and I would just go on there and type in and look up everybody else's stats, and it was insane. There was no way I matched up with these people. Like, not a chance in hell. And it took me a lot of work to kind of break that habit of just searching. Am I good enough? And you'll never find that on a message board, so stop doing that. This type of comparison is a fundamental mistake that so many people make, especially early in the process, and it can be a real dream killer. When we advertise ourselves to the world, almost anywhere, whether it's social media, job interviews, or anything else, we kind of put forth this Frankenstein perfect version of ourselves that doesn't really exist. We put forth this kind of fake hologram of what we think people will like or what people want us to be. And that's not really fair to ourselves or whoever we're trying to appeal to. Take any social media account, for instance. Your profile picture is probably the picture of you looking your best, doing some epic shit that you don't do on a day-to-day basis. And that's what we want people to think. We want people to think, oh, that's Johnny. That's what he does. He just goes heli skiing every weekend in the Swiss Alps. that must be his life. We know that's not normal life. We know that's not Johnny's every day. So really the best thing you can do is double down on what makes you, you. Another thing is when you're comparing yourself to others, you're only comparing to what they want you to see. So you're comparing your normal, mundane life, which we all lead, to somebody else's top 5 moments of their life. That's not really fair to yourself. Sidebar here, everyone, stats don't matter nearly as much as you think they do for your graduate school application. Yes, they matter, but that's not usually the make or break for getting into a program. They want to know who you are, but more on that in a later video. So quick story here about comparing yourself to other people. I remember on my very, very first day of PT school, we had a ceremony where everyone was in this big auditorium and they kind of introduced everyone to the program. They did so by having us walk across a stage. And as we walked across that stage, there was something, on a projector that was a little bit about our background or whatever. And months earlier, they had asked us, what's an accomplishment that you're most proud of? And as we walked across the stage, the announcer would say, this is the accomplishment that they're most proud of. So at that moment, the impostometer went up to like 1 million, off the charts, just insane. So there I was in this auditorium full of people, non-traditional student, 30 years old, person of color, covered in tattoos, who had just been playing in bands and running a small family business for 10 years. You can imagine, once I saw what everyone had been doing, I started just kind of sinking back into my chair and just kind of hoping no one would notice me in fear of being found out. I mean, it was crazy. There was people walking across the stage who already had PhDs, people who were like special forces in the military, people who had gold medals in all sorts of things, people who had worked on like curing cancer. And in that moment, I felt so far from being up to par with these people. If I hadn't worked through some of this stuff with these steps, it would have been over right there. But guys, as it turned out, over the 3 years that I got to know these people, they were just human beings underneath it all. They all had their fears and their insecurities, and we all kind of shared the same fears and insecurities, especially on that day. We looked back and talked about it and had some good laughs. Like everyone in that moment felt like they didn't belong. And these are some of the top achievers, that I've ever been around, feeling the same exact way as I did. So that's how I knew that these feelings were totally normal and something that we all just had to work through. All right, everyone, the third thing that you need to do to battle imposter syndrome is to identify it. Identify and push through. All right, now that you know why you're feeling like a total misfit, you can start to address these feelings. You have to come to terms that having those feelings is normal, and don't let it consume you. Yeah, it could throw you off from time to time, but you have to be able to kind of just step back and realize everyone around me is feeling the same way. I'm not alone. You have to let your individuality shine here. You have skills and experience that the world needs. The world doesn't need another copy of, Johnny whatever that you looked up, on Student Doctor Network. Whatever program you're getting into doesn't need 70 carbon copies of the same person. They need your weirdness. They need your whatever makes you feel like a misfit. Double down on that like we talked about before and really let it shine. And frankly, the further you are from the norm, the bigger impact you'll be poised to make in the future. Think about it, every great human accomplishment, whether it's an invention, a scientific breakthrough, or social movement, has been led by people who are misfits. Every great idea was considered to be a dumb idea at one point. Everyone who's made the biggest impacts were the furthest thing from the norm. And you see a lot of that going on right now with kind of our social environment here in the United States. It's the people who, aren't considered normal or the norm that are honestly making history right now and changing the world. And you're allowed to feel uncomfortable. You should seek out opportunities to feel uncomfortable. But you owe the world your authentic self. So the only way to do that is to, suffer through these times of feeling uncomfortable or different. And then eventually, the more you work at it, the more your real self comes forth and the more you can have an impact on the world. And everyone, you're allowed to be uncomfortable. Give people the opportunity to value your authentic self, not some cheap ripoff that you think that they're gonna like better, because they won't. They're gonna like the real you better, every time. Quick story about letting your authentic self shine through. I remember the night before interviews, I wanted to talk about video games in my interview. And I talked to so many people who were like, I wouldn't talk about gaming during a medical school interview. But you know what? Did it anyways. And no, I didn't go on some long rant about how to build the best Madden playbook to crush the hopes and dreams of every 13-year-old you play against. Although if you're looking for that, hit me up in the comments, I can definitely get you that. But bringing up video games gave me the opportunity to candidly talk about gamification and technology and all these things that I was really interested in that I think are going to have a major impact in my field of physical therapy coming up in the next 5 years. It was kind of a double win for me because, yeah, I got to talk about video games, but I also got to show the program that my individuality will help set me apart, and I really had something to bring to this class and hopefully to the field in general. All right, everyone, the fourth thing you can do to battle imposter syndrome is to talk about it. And I can't express this enough, guys. Talking about it is the best way to fight imposter syndrome. You're gonna be surprised that the people who you think are the elite of the elite in whatever peer group you're associated with have these same exact feelings. And once you kind of hear it from the horse's mouth that, yeah, I feel like I don't belong frequently too, that's gonna give you the strength and courage to just push forward and keep showing your authentic self and really go and crush whatever goals you have. Also, this gives you the opportunity to show people that you're vulnerable. And once you do that, people start to see that you're sincere and they start to trust you more. And that really helps build stronger relationships, in my opinion. And I can't express how important it is to be vulnerable while working in healthcare. There's so much to know when you work in healthcare. You're never gonna know everything, ever, within your field or especially in other fields. And you know what? You're honestly not gonna be the best provider for every patient ever. And you can't let that kind of chip away at your ego. You have to be vulnerable here. You need to be able to identify and be comfortable with knowing that you might not be the best provider for this patient, or you may not have the right answer for this patient. You need to be able to identify that and be okay with asking for help. In my opinion, the best doctors do this regularly. This is the whole reason why rounding exists. It gives everyone a chance to identify areas where they need help or where they think they could help others, and kind of a judgment-free zone, and it's all about just providing the best care for our patients. And it kind of all starts with being vulnerable, because if you don't raise your hand in rounds or if you don't ask questions in rounds, you're not gonna get the answers you need, and you're ultimately not gonna provide the best care possible for whatever patients you have. All right, guys, the fifth thing you need to do to battle imposter syndrome is just practice. Personally, the feelings of being an imposter haven't completely gone away for me. You know, I work in a big hospital system, and you're around so many smart doctors and just all these awesome PTs, and I'm still fairly new. So there's times where I'm like, holy shit, should I be here? You know what? It's okay to have these feelings. I've built up, you know, a tolerance, if you will, of kind of dealing with it. Like, yeah, it's normal to feel that way. I do belong here. I do bring value to this environment. And like I said before, being uncomfortable is a good thing. It's kind of a beacon saying that, yeah, you're on the right track. Because if you don't feel uncomfortable at all, you're probably not working towards the goals that you want. And you're probably not gonna grow much. Nobody made a mistake. You deserve to be where you are. And you kind of owe the world your authentic voice and your authentic experience, because we need you. We need everyone. Like I said, we don't need carbon copies of people who've done it before. We need your experience. The world needs your experience. So let that shine. All right, everyone, thanks for joining me for this episode. Let's recap the 5 things you need to do to crush imposter syndrome. 1, double down on what makes you you. Guys, be extra. Be the extra authentic version of yourself. We want it, we need it. 2, stop comparing. You're only comparing your normal day-to-day self to everybody's avatar of the best 5 moments of their life. Stop. 3, identify those feelings and push through. You have to keep going. It's normal to have those feelings. Number 4, talk about it. You will find out that your mentors and the people you look up to had those feelings and likely still have those feelings. It's gonna help a lot. Number 5, like I said, these feelings are probably never gonna fully go away, but the more we can kind of wrestle with them and be comfortable being uncomfortable, the less it's gonna impact your ability to achieve whatever goals you're going after. That's it for today. Thanks for joining me. Remember to like and subscribe to stay up to date on all my latest content. And also, if you have any questions or if you just want to share your experience, which I would love to hear, make sure to post that down in the comments. Also, guys, I got my Instagram up and running. I post a lot more content over there, so make sure to follow. I'll put the link on the screen right here. And as always, guys, go forth and crush whatever goals you have. Peace.